Panelists and debaters, thank you so very much for today's debate. As an American veteran, I am very excited to talk about today's geopolitical motion regarding that the ICC should unilaterally declare the authority to indict and prosecute any person in country. Within my speech, I will first begin with my direct refutations to the Prime Minister. I will go down my outline as what this debate is clearly about in opposition's eyes, what it is not about, our definitions, our unique weighing mechanism, as well as 2 points of positive matter in that a majority does not constitute correctness and that larger states in the ICC will absolutely abuse this. But first on to my refutations. And yes, opposition will contend with the fact, as Prime Minister has so clearly stated, that this is symbolic. The International Criminal Court is symbolic. Yes, while opposition absolutely believes the pursuit of criminal justice should be paramount in geopolitics, we ultimately then also concede, or rather contend with the fact that if this is simply symbolic, if they do not have any solvency already to begin with, then simply the arguments being utilized by opening government, they are simply just assumptions. They are assumptive that these host nations will actually unilaterally agree to these conditions and that the host nations will actually abide by and help facilitate these either detainments or indictments. My second refutation is, again, if there is no solvency in the ICC to begin with, they have no standing military, no peacekeeping forces, where are they suddenly going to get the solvency from? We have not been told necessarily where the funding for military forces or the funding for the containment facilities for these international criminals is going to be held. And so ultimately, opposition does not necessarily think that many of the arguments told today by opening government flow through. And then the last refutation is, I will take your POI in just a moment, that countries will be more willing to listen. Again, there has not been a mechanization as to how countries are supposed to listen to this. If they make the declaration internationally, but no country ratifies it, then this is just an empty declaration, and ultimately the status quo has been maintained. I'll take your POI.
Yeah, so the impacts that you're talking about are answered by my first and second point of positive matter when I say that building credibility as an impartial global authority makes other nations more likely to listen to to an organization that is trying things impartially rather than partially.
I'm not saying, opposition is not saying that building credibility here is not pertinent, but rather how can you build credibility when you have no logistics to start building your credibility, to start the detainment of these actors? And allow me to go on into my actual speech. This debate is fundamentally about whether international sovereignty supersedes criminal justice. Can the ICC supersede and break the sovereignty of international nations simply to pursue criminal justice? So, as far as definitions go, this House, absolutely the ICC, it's within the motion. We will accept the definition of unilaterally, indictments and prosecutions, of course, within the motion. But as far as the unique weighing mechanism presented to you today by opposition, it is the maintenance of sovereignty. If opposition can prove to you today that our weighing mechanism and our argumentation does not provide for more recognition of international sovereignty, then opposition is victorious and must get your vote today. But allow me to move on to my first point of argumentation, and that is majority does not constitute correctness. Through the information portion of today's motion, most of the planet has ratified the ICC and has signed on to it. However, we must recognize that unilaterally, simply just because you have a majority does not mean that any decision you make is automatically correct. There is still a decision-making process in which you must understand and contend with whether or not the consequences of your decision are acceptable. One example where the majority does not constitute moral correctness is the case of the splitting of West and East Germany. The people of Germany were kept split apart simply just because of a war effort and conflict that was not necessarily brought on by everybody. So because of a conflict that was brought on by the government of this country, almost everyone who survived this war, who stayed in Germany, was punished. They were punished economically. They were punished by not being allowed to stay with their families. They were kept separated all the way until the fall of the Berlin Wall. With this motion, Again, through what mechanism can the ICC just go into another country and unilaterally detain people? We have not been given the mechanization. Because of this, we have to consider what is the slippery slope of actions that will be taken by the ICC if they ever can somehow fundamentally gain militarization. We have to consider then what slippery slope of actions can they take, which brings me on to my next point of argumentation, in that larger states in the International Criminal Court will abuse this. Again, if there is an exclusive unilateral right by this international entity, can the host nation combat this? Through what mechanism will these indictments and prosecutions be served to these host nations? And again, since they have not mechanized how these prisoners will be detained, again, are they militarized peacekeeping forces, or are they militarized forces, or the UN-styled unarmed peacekeeping forces? I will take the POI from Air Force.
Isn't human rights abuse a clear guideline for prosecution?
Yes, opposition contends that, Yes, opposition contends that, oh my God. Yes, we're good. Opposition contends that human rights violations are absolutely worth pursuing. Opposition is not saying we should not pursue criminal justice. Opposition is not saying we should not pursue the advancement of human rights. Opposition is simply just stating that because of this legislation, because of this declaration, there is a slippery slope through which there will exist a mechanism that the international community could potentially abuse this. Again, this is 125 states out of the formally recognized about 175, 190 states of the world. So when we consider that it will be non-state actors who are either patrolling these host nations, or who are ultimately even controlling the streets of these nations because they have the unilateral right to declare anybody in these places as criminal, we have to then ask, what will the international community do with this? We know the signatories of the ICC. We know the United States is not on there. We know that other global players are not on there. They are not on there for the reason that we recognize as a modern world, international sovereignty cannot be breached. International sovereignty is the reason that we even have a slim margin of peace within our world. It is the absolute reason then that because this does not provide for the maintenance of sovereignty internationally, because this will be abused, your vote must go opposition. Thank you.